Hello, welcome to another edition of Curtis Jones Writing. I've been reading each chapter of all my books. If you're just tuning in, uh, and I'm on my third book, fourth book now. It is Love Endures All Things, a love story from a teen marriage through senior years. And I'm up to chapter 4 in this one. Uh, you could go back and look at all the other uh, posts I've made concerning the other books I've written, which was Dad's Old Truck 1, Dad's Old Truck 2, and Imagination, which had stories in it that came from my imagination, or at least part of them did. But if you remember when we started this one, we did Carry Away or Carried Away about how I accidentally got in the Navy. And the next one we did, let me go back here, was Homeward Bound about getting out, trying to get, thinking of a way to get out of the Navy. And then Home Again, how I got out of the Navy and got back with my family. And now we're doing Wedded Bliss, which is the fourth chapter in this book. And I think you'll enjoy it. It's got a little twist at the end. Scariest Night of My Life is the subtitle on this one. We were married on Friday afternoon, and now it is Saturday morning. I woke up, Stephanie woke up too. It was a wonderful night as we lay in bed and talked almost the whole night away. We went to the little kitchen and started the coffee pot making our morning joe. I had never asked, but it seems Stephanie didn't drink coffee, so we had to go get something she could have for a morning drink. Sweet Stephanie sat there with me. We talked as I had my morning coffee. She sipped on a cup of water. We spoke of the wonderful years that awaited us as we started our new life. We were so excited about the future, we couldn't see the state we were in with our money or lack thereof. The first thing on the agenda was what we were going to have for breakfast. At this time, the only places to go get breakfast was a little cafe or one of those chain coffee houses like Denny's or Sambo's. We had both in Modesto, about 3 miles from the trailer house we lived in. So we had breakfast there. I knew I couldn't afford to eat there every morning working at Campbell's Soup Company. We went back to the trailer, and Stephanie put away all her clothes and spoke of going to the grocery store. There was a Kmart about 2 miles from home, so we headed out there. We didn't make a list because I had almost nothing in the house besides the makings for coffee. So began our first outing for establishing a home. We had received plates, flatware, towels, sheets, and everything else in the way of household goods, but no food. As we entered the big store, we grabbed a basket and started our search for what we would eat that week. I had only a few dollars we could spend each week on food, so we would have to be careful. We got hamburger helper, tuna helper, and all kinds of helpers to eat. We thought we had done a good job because we still had about $5 left. So uh, we brought home 3 bags of food. On the drive home, we congratulated ourselves on what a good job we had done because, just say 2 pages here, I think. There we go. Because we felt like we had a handle on this making home business. We hugged and kissed and admired our abilities to shop. When we unloaded the bags, we put them neatly in the shelves so everything could be found easily. We went to the living room. By that, I meant we turned around and sat down. I turned on the tiny black and white television set we had. Almost no one had color TVs in those days. We watched it as we sat very close together and embraced each other. We sat there for a couple of hours when a knock on the door brought us back to the real world. We were invited to Mom's house for lunch to watch, to which we gladly accepted. We spent most of the afternoon there and were asked to stay for dinner. We said we wanted to cook our first dinner at home, and we left Mom's excitedly, walking back to our little house. It was about 7 in the evening when we started to make dinner. We had decided on hamburger helper, and as we pulled it from the shelves, we read the instructions. Panic struck us both because we didn't get any hamburger meat to be helped with this package. The tuna helper was the same story. In fact, everything we bought needed something else to make it into food. We had cereal, but no milk. We had lunch meat, but no bread. Everything we had needed something else to be cooked with. I had eggs and no bacon. For our first dinner, we had fried bologna and fried eggs. This was not my favorite meal, but love hides many shortcomings. We were in love. We went to church Sunday and snuck off in the afternoon and spent part of my week's gas money and the last $5 on things that we had missed so we might have save ourselves from starving that first week. We got through just fine. The next week, we had a list to take with us, so we spent much more time going through the store and making sure we had what went with the packaged foods so we could prepare it. They say that the young can live on love, but the truth is, love has the ability to help you endure the hardships of a difficult life, but you can't live on it. So the next stage of our relationship was learning how to exist on a very limited budget. We earned, or I earned enough for me when I was single and little for dating, Stephanie, but to support the two of us, it fell short. We never became hungry over our financial shortcomings. We just expressed our love for each other and tightened our belts. No, 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 don't get on that table. Get down, come here. Oh, come here. There we go. There you go. This is what's giving us trouble today. Her name is Lexi, and she likes to jump on my recliner and climb on the little table set next to it and pull my important papers off and chew them up. You won't do that while I'm working, will you? Okay. Say hello. Calm down. Let me what I'm doing. Now leave me alone for a few minutes. Campbell Soup paid more than the signal station where I started when I got out of the Navy, but it was still wasn't quite enough. We could get by, but there was nothing extra for clothes or even small gifts. I began to worry about the money we didn't have, and Stephanie picked up on it. She said she wanted to go to work too. I said that she wouldn't have to work as long as she was married to me. I have to laugh at that. Uh, that was the end of it, but only to my way of thinking. Everything went well for a few weeks, and we learned how to live within our resources, thanks largely to Stephanie's ability to find coupons for the foods we needed. We were as happy as two people had ever been. I didn't see any end to our good fortune. We had a routine where we got up about 9 in the morning and I left for work about 2:30 and I got home about 12:20 every weekday. Stephanie got along well with mom and my sisters. She spent the early afternoons with mom watching a soap opera called Dark Shadows. I don't know if you remember that one of mom's favorites, and it became Stephanie's too. As always seems the case, when everything is going perfectly, that is when they go wrong. I went to work on a Thursday afternoon. It was a normal day. I had my lunch at 6, and the big bosses left for the day. It was when things got more relaxed in the day. My supervisor came to me and asked me to go help the nighttime USDA inspector for a little while. We were always worried about keeping them happy because they could shut the plant down. I said yes, and I went looking for him. His name was Bill. I found him outside the main plant where he had a small trailer that was converted into a lab for testing for pathogens. As I went out into or onto the dock where the trailer was parked, I saw Bill standing at the door to the lab. I called to him. He looked at me and went into the lab. I didn't think anything about it, even though he said nothing. The lab sat outside of the building and was a separate space. It had a phone line connected to the main building, an electric connection, and it was entirely separate from the plant. I went to the lab door and knocked on it. I heard Bill say, "Come on in, it's open." I opened the door and walked in. Bill was just inside and bent over some samples, looking at them very intensely. I walked to the other end of the trailer to be out of his way. There was no windows in this little trailer, and it was filled with bright lights. The inside was stark white, which gave it a very bright intensity. I felt like I needed sunglasses. Bill stayed bent over for a few more minutes, and I began to look around and inspect the equipment in the lab. I was what doing that when I felt Bill's hand on my leg. He had walked up behind me and was standing very close. His hand reached around me from the right and was holding my right leg just above the knee. I jumped back as soon as I felt him grab my leg. I was against his belly and I could feel his breath on my neck. It was hot and moist. He was a little taller and a lot heavier than me. He pushed me against the counter I was standing against. He His mass pinned me there. I became very afraid of him. I thought he was going to rape me in that little building. I let out a scream and yelled, "What are you doing to me?" He didn't say anything but backed away from me and looked at me for a long minute and then said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were interested." I was very shook up and started to leave, but the door had been locked. I locked it when I went to my supervisor. I unlocked it and went to my supervisor and told him what had happened. He sent me home and I left the plant. I got home about 7:30. Stephanie asked what was wrong. I told her what had happened. She said, "I never thought anything like that would happen to a man." She sympathized with me and said she understood. When I left for work, I was told to come in the next morning and report to the personnel office. When I got to the plant the next day, I went into the office of the head of that department because he wanted to hear what had happened from me. I walked into the big, beautiful office with rich furniture and a large desk in the middle of the room. The man that sat at the desk was older, with salt and pepper hair and a thin mustache just above his lip, like one of the old movie stars. He asked me to have a seat in a big chair that was set in the middle of the room, facing his desk. As I sat there, he asked me to tell him what had happened last night, and I began the story supervisor, when my supervisor asked me to help Bill and the USDA guy. He sat there very quietly and didn't even make an expression on his face. When I finished the story, he thought for several minutes and then he calmly stood up and said, "Collect your things from your locker and a guard will escort you off the property. We won't be needing you back." I was given a full week's pay, even though I had only worked 4 days. When I left the property, I think they had already decided what they would do with me before I got there. I went back home and told Stephanie. I went to mom's and told her. I got up early Monday morning and went to the employment office. I had a job by late afternoon. I didn't like the job with the swimming pool company. I saved money so we could go to Kansas where my favorite uncle lived. That was Uncle Sam, my father's baby brother. He had always been my favorite. I think he liked me too. With the new job, I was off Mondays and Tuesdays, and I had to work on the weekend. It was always hot. It was hard work. I worked on my car and on my off days to make it ready for the long trip to Kansas. I took the engine apart, overhauled it, and I put it back together and drove it until we could know the work was worthy for the trip. I talked to Uncle Sam often. He welcomed us to come stay with him until we could get on our feet. We said we would help. He said he would help me get a job and an apartment with my second payday. We were all set, we thought. In about a month, we were all ready. Were as ready as we could be. I loaded up the car and filled up the trunk and the back seat to level with the windows. We said our goodbyes. We headed out at 10 o'clock in the morning. We both thought of it as a great adventure. It was the first time Stephanie and I had ever been on a long trip on our own. We drove most of the day, and we carried a lunch with us so we could keep going. Thanks, Mom. We arrived in a small town called Mojave, California. It was about 6 p.m., and we stopped at a small cafe and got Stephanie a hot chocolate and filled my thermos with very hot coffee because I was going to drive all night. This town is where the Mojave Desert starts in the west and runs eastward. As I got our drinks, the waitress saw the just married sign on the car and commented that whatever we ate on our wedding night would be the most common meal we would eat during our marriage. I told Stephanie what she said, and we ate our sandwiches as we pulled out. Just outside Mojave is where our first argument happened. It was my fault, and I felt very bad about it. We were about 20 miles down the road from Mojave when I asked Stephanie to pour me a cup of coffee. She asked me to pull over and so she wouldn't spill it on the carpet. I told her I didn't want to because it was going to be a long night. She asked twice and I would not consent. She began to pour the coffee. At that moment, I began to hit the bumps in the road. The very hot coffee spilled on Stephanie's leg and burned her. She began to cry, so we stopped. We took cold water and splashed on her legs. It helped a little bit, but we had our first argument. I was so guilty for instigating it. I apologized to her until she went to sleep. I drove into the night. I stopped for bathroom breaks and to get gas when needed. I also got more coffee as we traveled, but I stopped for her to pour it. Also, it went well until we came to New Mexico. We had driven about 25 miles into the state when the car engine froze up and the tires began to squeal. I slammed in the clutch and allowed it to coast to a stop on the shoulder of the road. We were about 10 miles from Gallup, New Mexico. It was about 4 in the morning. I was so tired, and it was so dark. There was a truck weigh station about a mile down the road from where we sat. I used the headlights to flash out the Morse code for SOS for over an hour without any kind of response. We stayed in the car and waited for the sun to come up at about 7 in the morning. When I got when it got light, we talked about what to do, and I told her I didn't want to leave her alone. She walked with me to get help. She said she wouldn't stay there alone anyway. So we started to walk away from the car. We hadn't gone but maybe 100 yards when a pickup with 4 people in the cab and 3 in the bed stopped and asked if we needed a ride. We were very thankful for their kindness. They were local Indians. They were very nice. I think it was a family or parents, family parents were maybe in their 40s, and the oldest child was maybe my age, 18, 19. We had them let us off at a truck stop on the outskirts of town. I asked to have the car towed to a shop to see if it could be repaired. That took 1/4 of our money to have it towed. I got worried then. We walked about 3 miles into the main part of town and got a room for the night. That took about half of our money. I thought I had better call for help. I called Dad and asked if he could help us. He turned me down flat. I waited several hours and called Uncle Sam and told him what had happened. He said he would send us bus fare to get to Wichita, Kansas, where he lived. I told him if he could just send enough money to get Stephanie there, I would hitchhike. He laughed and said he wouldn't send enough. He would send enough for both of us. We had supper that night. That cleaned us out. The bus stopped there at 6 a.m. We were there ready to go. The tickets were waiting on us when we got to the bus station. We didn't eat again until we were at Uncle Sam's. The ride to Kansas went through New Mexico, Texas, into Oklahoma City, and we changed to another bus there, and it was only about 4 hours until we were at Uncle Sam's. I was never so glad to see anyone in my whole life. Uncle Sam and Aunt Ann treated us like we were their own children. It was the best love I had ever felt from a father figure in my life. Uncle Sam and Aunt Ann had two sons at that time. In a few days, Uncle Sam told me to go and apply for a job at a furniture manufacturing company in town. I was hired when I filled out the application. I loved Uncle Sam better than my own father because he was a better father to me than mine was. Stephanie felt the same way. We had moved into one of their bedrooms and were given as much privacy as we wanted. They loaned us one of their cars. I used it to go to work. If Stephanie and I wanted to go out, it was as if the car was ours. I worked from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Stephanie stayed home alone during the day. Aunt Ann and Uncle Sam both worked. Their boys were in school. One day I came home from work. Stephanie was said she needed to talk to me. We left Uncle Sam and Aunt Ann in the yard where we had all been talking after we were all home from work. Stephanie and I went to the house and to our room. We sat on the bed and she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Brace yourself, honey." When she said she was pregnant with our first child, I was overjoyed. She said my eyes were as big as silver dollars. I was indeed excited. I hugged her and thanked her. I said, "Thank you," and I ran outside to tell Uncle Sam the good news. I bolted out the screen door and ran up to Uncle Sam as fast as I could. I said with as much enthusiasm as I could, "We're getting pregnant." Uncle Sam said with a belly laugh that made Aunt Ann laugh too, "Right now?" I had to think for a moment to get the humor in my statement. I was so excited I wanted to be a father. It was a wonderful time at their house. Stephanie and I both loved it. I worked 3 more weeks after that exciting day. I fell one day into a machine and caught my right hand. They had to stop the machine and back it up to get me out. It broke 3 bones in my hand, but it had not broken the skin. I was sent to the hospital and told not to come back to work until the doctor released me. The breaks were right in here. My big sister was in Oklahoma at that time. They called Uncle Sam and we spoke for a while. They said that I should come to Oklahoma and live with them so I would not be a burden to Uncle Sam. I agreed. They came up to pick us up the next day. I hated to say goodbye to Uncle Sam and Aunt Ann. We did, and we rode back to Muskogee, Oklahoma with Betty and her husband Lee. When we got there, we discovered that they were living with one of my cousins, who was kind, but really didn't want so many folks moving in on her. There was almost no food in the house, and after 3 days, Stephanie and I talked and called her mother. We asked her if she could come and get us and take us back to California, and she agreed. And in 36 hours, she was there, and we started back to California with them. During those 36 hours, we had only cheddar cheese and a barbecue sauce. It was not fun anymore. The trip back to California was filled with lecture after lecture. A scornful mother in law had a serious concern about how I was taking care of her daughter. I was very distraught, but sweet Stephanie defended me at every objection her mother made. I could truly feel Stephanie's love for me. Before we got to California, Stephanie told her mother we were going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby. The rest of the trip went much better after that revelation. My love for Stephanie and her defense of me made me love her more with every fiber of my being. And now she was going to be the mother of my child. I was happy once again. I hope you enjoyed this story. I'll present chapter 5 next time, and the title of that one is Baby Makes Three. Uh, I hope you come back and listen to that story. My my life has been a series of strange events, but they brought me to where I am and made me and Stephanie the happiest couple I knew. If you get in a hurry to hear these stories, you can go to my webpage here that's curtis-jones-books.squarespace.com, and they have links that can take you to Amazon where you can purchase these books. And if you got an e-reader, you can get them in e-book or in paperback like this one. And some of my books are in hardback. I don't think this one is yet, but I'm working on making them all in hardback. And it tells you what each book is about, a little bit about each book and where they go. And you can also go to my Facebook page. It's Curtis Jones Author page at Facebook, and it also has links to Amazon. And both of them have links that take you to the seminars I began putting on before COVID came. And it's this one is posted at the Montgomery Public Library, so you could go see that while you're searching those sites. God bless you and take care of you until the next time. You be careful, and I will talk to you the next time.